Hello, my name is Devin Jones, and welcome to this edition of the Sparks Tribune Report. You can find me on Twitter at the user handle provided in the description box below, and on sparkstribune.org. Sparks is spelled with an X, sparkstribune.org. And today I would like to address an issue that we've generally left to CNN and MSNBC to cover such issues, and that is namely Donald Trump and his administration. While the mainstream press is focused, ubiquitously on Donald Trump, the progressive left has correctly, by the way, said that, well, he's only a symptom of the cause. Therefore, let's talk about these other issues that gave rise to the possibility of having a Donald Trump presidency, to address the socioeconomic disparities that would cause people to be willing to vote for such an inflammatory political figure in the first place. So that's what progressive media has done, and done a good job of in these recent couple of years. But there's also another nuance here that needs to be added to the conversation, and that is particularly that while Donald Trump is only a symptom, he is also a uniquely evil symptom. There is a unique bad about Donald Trump as a president, as the leader of an administration, as a candidate. He is a unique evil. So that needs to be discussed as well, and particularly within the context of what do progressives do during the DNC, because and let's just assume for a moment a hypothetical that they are going to cheat Bernie Sanders. What if it was Warren versus Donald Trump? Are we Bernie or bust? By the way, then, are we Bernie or bust if it's Warren versus Trump? Because the difference there, and where to draw that line, in my opinion, is whether your option against Donald Trump is going to be a candidate that is going to address the problems that gave rise to Donald Trump. That would be a victory at the polls, right? We would not necessarily have a victory in the polls just because we got rid of Donald Trump if we end up with Joe Biden. Okay, that is where we end up with a situation where we were Bernie and bust in 2015 and 2016, remember? But do you remember why? It was issue-based. It was policy-based. Not so much anymore. That doesn't even seem like people have read the platforms of the candidates that they're all more than willing to bash and smears. And they'll just, and the most hyperbole you've ever heard, by the way, corporate shill being used to refer to somebody like Elizabeth Warren, or, something like that. I mean, that's hyperbole. She's not a good candidate. She's not a great candidate, but Elizabeth Warren would at least go after Wall Street, right? Isn't economic disparity part of what gave rise to Donald Trump? She would go after Wall Street. So to say that you would not vote, or that you would be one of the 47% of eligible voters, like in 2016, as was the case, 47% of eligible voters did not vote. So to have a candidate like Elizabeth Warren, and go ahead and be mad at me, by the way, or Pete Buttigieg, in response to being told by the progressive movement, the progressive left, that he was not running on anything, and there were I'm not going to name names right now, but there were people literally putting him at the bottom of a list of at the very bottom, by the way. He responded, by the way, directly after which, by publishing a 23-point platform page where he did address economic and social disparities. So, no, he's not as progressive as Bernie Sanders. But any one of the candidates who do approach issues that are systemic in nature to the reasons for the disparities that led us to Donald Trump, if you follow me on that, although that was a bit extended of it, but anyone who is addressing the problems that gave rise to Donald Trump in the first place, if they're going to be on the ballot against Trump in the general election, it seems absurd to me that you would at that point be Bernie or bust at that point in the general election. Like, it's Donald Trump or it's Warren, for example, just as an example. To say that you would be Bernie or bust at that point, that would be a very costly decision. It would also be just as costly if the DNC force-fed Joe Biden down our throats like they did in 2016, and 47% of eligible voters didn't vote, and we'll be halfway into Donald Trump's second term as president, his second term as president, and we'll be saying, well, 47% of eligible voters didn't vote. Well, that's why. I mean, if they give us Joe Biden, what are we looking at here? Both have had racist sentiments in the past. Both have bad records with Wall Street. There isn't a distinguishable difference between the two when you look past the surface, when you look past the smoke screen, the verbiage that comes out of their mouth while they're attempting to to disassociate themselves from the ideology or the mindset of a Donald Trump. But if you look into their policies, there's no real difference. The systemic issues that perpetuated the disparities that gave us Donald Trump are not being addressed. Therefore, if it was Joe Biden, and I could perfectly understand if you were to say, well, actually, I would be doing greater if I voted Green Party, and because we would be facilitating their 50-state ballot access. From what I understand, the Green Party actually needs to secure a certain number of votes just to have the right to be on the ballot, which sounds a little absurd. But so movement building will be needed, will be necessary for the Green Party to do anything. That being said, we should not be talking about the Green Party as long as, like right now, before they cheat Bernie Sanders, it looks like he has a chance. First choice. After that, let's say they oust him one way or another. We're getting kind of an idea on how they might be planning that one. But if it's Warren, like if it's Buttigieg, I don't think it's going to be Gabbard. The DNC will not stand for that. The DNC will not stand for that. The military-industrial complex would charge her. But at any rate, they're not going to put up with the Gabbard. Bernie Sanders is electable. While we're using that term correctly, Bernie Sanders is electable, but I don't think they'll let him become the nominee. Particularly, by the way, with given his history with the Democratic Party, he generally will win the Democratic nomination, and this is in reference to other races that he's been in for the Senate. But what he does is he gains the nomination of the Democratic Party, and then turns it down. He'll win the nomination and turn it down, which leaves the Democrats without someone to challenge him. Right? It leaves him running the left by himself, and it actually preserves his ability to be an independent. Him being in the Democratic Party or playing ball with the Democratic Party facilitates him being able to be unassociated officially with the Democratic Party. To those of you who are wondering, why is he work like the Jimmy Dore? Jimmy Dore, excellent guy. I love Jimmy Dore. Jimmy Dore's awesome, and he tells the truth that others will not tell. But he's wrong about that particular point, and we can all respectfully agree to disagree on certain issues, as we all have independent thoughts in our head. I'm sure a lot of you were angry at the individual thought in my head when I said I would vote for a Warren over Trump. Fine. But we all disagree on different things, and that's one of the things I think Jimmy Dore is wrong about, is that's why Bernie Sanders is working with the Democratic Party. It's not at the behest of the Democratic Party. They know that. They hate him, remember? He's going to attempt to secure the nomination, and he'll most likely do the same thing he has done in the past. I wrote an article about that, about Bernie Sanders preparing a colossal blow to the DNC, something to that effect. I wrote an article about that in the Sparks Tribune, which you can find. Again, Sparks Tribune, spell Sparks with an X, sparkstribune.org. But at any rate, so that's probably why they're not going to give him the nomination in the first place, or attempt to prevent him from getting it. They want the leader of the free world to be a Democrat. Sometimes it's hard to believe, but they do want to win. They're just foolish about how to go about that, and they don't really have an agenda for people. They have an agenda for donors. So, and that's part of why Bernie Sanders runs as an independent. We already know all of this. At any rate, I basically just wanted to say that we were Bernie and bust in 2015, 2016, and that was for a reason. The only other option was Hillary Clinton, who, compared with Donald Trump, juxtaposed with his policies, was not that darn different, or had evils of her own that matched in magnitude to whatever scandal we were being fed to from, Donald Trump and his campaign. We had rot coming from both ends, and we were told to choose which stink we liked better. Now we have a plethora of candidates, and all points on the ideological spectrum, for the most part, mainstream political spectrum is on the ballot. From Gravel and Gabbard, Sanders, Warren, Buttigieg, And then you go on into the right-wing section of the Democratic Party with your Cory Bookers and Kamala Harris's and such. And that would be a tougher decision, I think, for me to make if it was a Kamala Harris. Like, what would be worth more? You know, would it be worth ousting Donald Trump? I don't think so. She didn't manage to prosecute Steven Mnuchin. So if we're talking about cause and symptom, the economic disparities that led us to the rise of Donald Trump are not being addressed. So, ouch. We might end up, you know, even Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump, looking back on this and saying 47% of eligible voters didn't vote, maybe more than that in the case of Harris. Well, I don't know, Clinton was pretty special when it came to corruption. I don't know if anybody would match that, but 47% of eligible voters not voting, that is a lot of people, a lot of youth, a lot of younger people that are saying, no, I'm not going to choose between these two. Or some of them are not included in that 47%, by the way, voted for the Green Party. I think at the end of the day, that was like 4% or something they managed to curate, which is why, if I'm not mistaken, and look this up, they need to have, I think, 5% or so in the polls to be able to maintain 50 state ballot access. So at that point, it might be worth it. If it was Kamala Harris, throw your vote to the Green Party, my personal opinion. If it was Cory Booker, same thing. Biden, definitely. If it's Biden, I'm going to become a Green Party person real quick. But, I mean, other than that, read the platform before you talk about Bernie or bust. With this many people, and some of them being semi or quasi-progressive, you're juxtaposing them with Donald Trump, who is uniquely evil to a certain extent and in various unique ways. So don't just say Bernie or bust immediately, because that's not being issue-based anymore. That's the thing that birthed Bernie or bust was issue-based politics. Don't take the Bernie or bust and turn it and flip it around from issue-based to person-based ideology. Don't do that. You know, there are people that are running other than Sanders, you know, not as progressive as Sanders in any case, by the way, and that's my opinion, that he is the single most progressive person running. But there are other individuals who have in their platforms the need to address Wall Street, for instance, to tether or pull them back from just the unfettered rogue capitalism that they've been perpetuating. But at any rate, read their platform before giggling and tweeting "booty judge." Before. I mean, yes, Warren is bad when we talk about Warren, and I keep picking on these two, but I don't like the fact that she placated to Donald Trump to stoop to the same level as Donald Trump, and you know, he calls her Pocahontas, and then she goes and gets a DNA test, and both of them are being just as stupid. Both of them are being children. Neither one. At that point, we're not talking policy, are we? We're gawking at Donald Trump for being a racist, and then we're gawking at Elizabeth Warren for playing into it, and then but we're not talking policy. So, who wins? Not the people. It becomes bread and circuses. Then we're comparing individuals again, a person-centered ideology. But look at the platform, and decide in your mind what's worth it. Would it be better if this person was in office as opposed to Donald Trump? Would this person at least help some of the problems that was a harbinger of his rise? And make a political decision based upon platform distinctions, issues. This used to be about policy. It doesn't seem to be about that anymore. Please check me out on the internet, sparkstribune.org. Sparks, spell Sparks with an X, tribune.org. And you can find me on Twitter if you wish to rant at me for having an independent thought in my head at the user handle provided in the description box below. And you have a wonderful Sunday.